Okay, so hello, my name is Johanna Bueck, and I'm going to present our model on the social effects of depression. Um, and right now, I'm doing my master's degree in psychology at the University of Bonn, and we developed that model during my internship in Glasgow. First, I'm going to talk a bit about the theoretical background of our model, the methods we used for our model, our results, and then I'm going to discuss those results. So depression is common and has major consequences. Around 30 to 40% of people, at least in the Western world, will experience at least one depressive episode in their life. And depression is highly recurring with an increasing risk for another episode after each episode. So 50% of people experiencing one depressive episode will experience at least one other depressive episode throughout their life. Depression is also a highly disabling disorder, and half of depressed people seek treatment, and around half of those experience a reduction of depressive symptoms after treatment. The social network of a person affects their depression risk. For example, the social isolation predicts depression, and there's a protective effect of social support on depression. But also, we have contagion effects of depression. So, frequent contact with depressed people heightens the risk for people to become depressed themselves. This contagion risk spreads up to 3 degrees of separation. That's comparable to contagion risk found for smoking or happiness. And the emotional contagion theory explains this via two pathways. So first we have mood contagion. We are susceptible to the mood of people in our environment, and frequent contacts influences our mood. And furthermore, the imitation of negative emotion regulation behavior that is prevalent in people with depression, which may result in dysfunctional coping strategies and an effect called co-rumination. Rumination is the repeated focus on negative aspects and negative symptoms without taking up any action to relieve them and any productive action to relieve them. And the co-rumination is if people do that together in social contact. The depression also affects the social network of a person because it shapes the social network of a person. This is called the homophily effects, which are also found for depression. So people tend to befriend people who are similar to them, and that includes similar in their depression levels. And friendships also last longer if people are more similar. One is suspected reason for homophily effects of depression are for example, peer rejection, because non-depressed people may reject depressed people, which only leaves other depressed people for depressed people to socialize with. And another reason for clustering of depression in the population is the heritability of depression. So the variance estimates that are explained, the variance that is explained by genetic factors in depression is around 30 to 50%. And children of depressed parents are 3 times more likely to become depressed themselves than children of healthy parents. Which brings us to our problem. The influences of these feedback effects within the social network and within the lifetime of a person should be taken account when intervention strategies for depression are developed. But interventions often target mental health services, and depression is only often targeted on an individual level. Previous modeling work focused on either intervention effects or contagion effects, which does not show possible feedback effects within the network structure and the effects of family history. So our goal was to create a preliminary model that incorporates those feedback effects to determine possible effective interventions against depression. We did that by modeling social support effects, contagion effects, homophily effects, and heritability effects of depression. And we also included variables that are known to interact with depression, which are education and employment. Then we calibrated our model against empirical population data, and we implemented some possible interventions, which I'm going to talk about later. So in our model, in each time step, agents can enter a depressive episode. If they have contact with depressed agents, their risk for depression is heightened with different probabilities depending on the contact type. So friends, for example, or acquaintances or parents. Healthy friends and spouses reduce that risk with different probabilities. The risk is also influenced by the risk in previous years and the susceptibility of an agent for depression. Agents may then seek therapy and experience a reduction of symptoms, and depressed agents may also experience spontaneous remission. Then we implemented social network dynamics. So newly created agents are assigned to an available couple, and for that agent, a social network is created. Agents lose friends and acquaintances and gain new ones, and depressed agents do not always gain new friends or acquaintances. By doing that, we wanted to account for the social isolation of depression. New friends and acquaintances also have a higher probability of being similar in their depression levels. By doing that, we wanted to account for homophily effects. Then we implemented some depression influences on education and employment. So depressed agents have a risk of not achieving their parents' socioeconomic status, reflecting depression effects on educational achievement, and depressed agents have a risk of losing their job, resulting in a loss of income, and accounting for depression effects on employment. We calibrated our model. The parameters we calibrated were the transmission and social support parameters, the distribution of the genetic susceptibility and the heritability, so the amount with which the genetic susceptibility determines the phenotypic susceptibility. Then the amount with which the previous risk in previous years determines the risk in the current time step, and homophily parameters. And then we compared outcome parameters to empirical data. So we looked at contagion effects and looked on the increase of risk after contact with a depressed agent, which we calculated by the number of contacts becoming depressed after contact with that depressed agent. And we also looked at that dependent on contact type. Then we looked at heritability effects by implementing twins and using Falkenrath's formula. And also at prevalence estimates for lifetime and 12-month prevalence and recurrence probabilities. Recurrence probabilities are the probability of developing another depressive episode after having one depressive episode or after having two depressive episodes and so on. Then we implemented some interventions. One intervention, for example, looked at the availability of therapeutic spaces, which we implemented by just forcing every agent to take up therapy. The next intervention we implemented reduced the social isolation of depression by preventing friend loss for depressed agents. The next intervention reduced the job loss due to depression by preventing that job loss. Depressed agents couldn't lose their jobs if they became depressed. And the last one was preventing educational dropout for depressed children. These are our results. So this is one snapshot of a social network at the end of a simulation with our calibrated parameter values. Blue are the agents with no history of depression, orange are those with a history of depression, and red the ones that are currently depressed. And as you can see, we have some clustering in our network. These are our results regarding our model sensitivity to the change of certain parameters. So on the left, you can see the sensitivity of our model outcomes to changes in the friend homophily, and on the right, to changes in the transmission rate between parents and children. As you can see, the changes in friend homophily don't have any effect on our model outcomes, and changes in the transmission rate, however, have moderate effects on our model outcomes. Here you can see on the left changes in the model sensitivity, changes in the parameter change effects on the model sensitivity for the transmission rate between friends, and on the right for the social support effect of friends. And as you can see, changes in the transmission rate between friends doesn't have as much as an effect as changes in the social support effect of friends, which seem to have a strong effect on our model outcomes. And then again, on the left, you can see the changes in the transmission rate between spouses and their effects on our model outcomes, and on the right, the social support effect of spouses. And again, as previously, the changes in the transmission rate between spouses does not have as strong as an effect as changes in the social support effect of spouses. And lastly, on the left, you can see changes in the number of friends and how that affects our model outcomes. These have a very strong effect. And on the right, changes in the number of acquaintances and how that changes our model outcomes. And this also has an effect, but not as strong as the changes in the number of friends. These are our results regarding the intervention effects. And as you can see, none of the interventions seem to have any strong effect whatsoever. So to sum up, the transmission rate for parents and children had a moderate effect on our outcomes, but for the other social connections, the transmission rate appears largely irrelevant. But the supporting effects of friends and spouses had a strong effect on our model outcomes, as well as the number of friends. And none of the interventions had a substantial effect on our model outcomes, which may be because these parameters are not targeted by the tested interventions, which may account for their small effects. So future interventions could focus on strengthening those positive effects and training positive support behavior, for example, in schools, or implementing social support training in populations who may be at risk. And to increase socializing success of depressed people, positive coping mechanisms should be reinforced and negative coping behavior, especially in social contexts, reduced. And interventions should also focus on reducing peer rejection of depressed individuals. Because as you can see, the number of friends has a strong effect on our model outcomes. But if friend loss for depressed people is minimized, that does not seem to have a strong effect, which may tell us that depressed agents need to have healthy friends, and losing depressed friends or gaining depressed friends does not have any effects on their mental health. So we only looked at a small number of outcome variables, which may make it hard to discover possible feedback effects. For example, we didn't look at any indicators for effects on economy, which may be especially interesting regarding employment effects and feedback effects of employment and economy. We also only looked at a small number of social contact types, and we didn't look at suicides or any mortality dependent on lifestyle. Our agents just die at 80. We also didn't look at effects of unemployment on depression, only of depression on unemployment. And that could be especially interesting to look at since there may be some cascading effects in that direction. And implementing these variables might further deepen our understanding of the social effects and feedback effects in the context of depression. So that is some future work that could be looked at. And thank you for your time.